Hey, yo, what it do, y'all? Let's get right into it. We got blessed late last night, actually, with the full reveal of all 12 Ascendencies that are going to be in early access. And I figured I should definitely take this video to talk to you guys about it because, well, we didn't think we were going to get this information, especially after finding out that we were going to be locked into our Ascendancy choices going into PoE 2 early access, which everybody, has some moderately negative feelings about. And so I think this is really cool and very awesome they actually did this, even though unfortunately it came at the hands of people leaking it throughout the day and us GTG being like, fine, we'll make it. I'm glad they did it. It's really hype inducing. And it actually shows a lot of the beauty in how these ascendancies are designed. I feel like this full reveal does a good amount of justice to every ascendancy. My opinions of the ascendancies now are a lot more positive across the board, as opposed to, if you remember from the showcase video, the showcase overview, I talked about how the ascendancies felt. Some of them felt a little lackluster. Now I see the vision. They no longer feel uninspired. They do feel like full classes. And so today, I don't want to talk to you about every single node and every ascendancy. That is for your eyes, and that cooking is for you to do, right? Or for you to see what other people are cooking, or you can tune in on stream on Friday to see what I'm cooking, for example, right? But what I want to talk about is the uniqueness of these ascendancies, right? Just how well they've done at giving the ascendancies a unique role. And I'm going to do that one by one because I think it's actually really cool how each one formed its own role. So, like, comment, subscribe if you're on with the video, as well as let me know what you're interested in, or if I miss your favorite unique feature, because some of these ascendancies have more than one unique feature about them that is worth talking about, right? So I'm mostly highlighting the ones that I'm super fixated on, and my attention span and your attention span might not align. Let's go though. So starting with the Stormweaver, the big thing that stood out to me about Stormweaver is definitely just going to have to be Rain Dancer. I think you could have given it to Force of Will as well. Like, I mean, like, Force of Will, I think is going to be the objectively stronger one if I had to take a guess between the two. I think mana scaling is just something that's a little ridiculous conceptually speaking, but Rain Dancer is more interesting to me. The ability to really lean into the elemental storm side of this ascendancy is really cool. And I think it fits the rest of this ascendancy better than the mana node did, because Tempest or Stormweaver is all about, like, lightning and cold damage, and really just leaning into elemental magic, and then layering it on. It even has the ailment nodes and whatnot too. But I think that Tempest Caller is the home plate for, like, boom, look at all this investment in elemental damage, the mastery of it, spawning these storms that we can spawn so many of, right? Like, I'm pretty sure you remember the footage from the showcase where they have a ton of storms out. And I think it's really cool to think about it being a socketable skill that we can scale up the cooldown and duration of even further, maybe even the AoE of, to then potentially create like a bake zone. And that's what I'm interested in for this ascendancy, right? Again, honorable mention to Force of Will. It is really strong. Like, it did not take me very long to realize that Force of Will is strong. I just, it doesn't tickle the same itch and interest to me that Rain Dancer does. Next up, Chronomancer. Another really cool ascendancy. I think actually the original showcased the coolest part of this, which is definitely going to be Time Snap. I like Time Freeze is dope and all, but Time Snap is definitely the thing that I'm the most interested in from this ascendancy, just because it gives a lot of credence to the idea of the cooldown play that GG is trying to add to the game, and this feels like a core part of that puzzle. It opens up a playstyle that we have never had in the franchise before, and that's something that I think is really interesting to me. The full-on burst Mage Fantasy really comes together with a skill that lets you reburst, right? It's always just been like kind of a part of like burst characters being ridiculous. Just think about all the times that, like, somebody's popped like an Echo Shard in Deadlock, or there's an equivalent item, a refresher in Dota, and been like, oh my god, they did it again. What is that shit, man? Like, that's what I think of when I think of the Time Snap effect, and I think that's gonna be really cool. This ascendancy is overall really well themed and put together. It's just that Time Snap to me stands ahead a bit above the rest. But the rest of the supporting nodes are very nice, because I think it'll rest people's concerns that this ascendancy has no real nodes. That was like a lot of talk before, when we only had seen 3 nodes, that people were like, but it has no real damage nodes, it has no defense. Like, come on, we hadn't seen the full ascendancy yet, so I'm glad that we did to like put that to rest. Now, let's talk about the Titan. I love the Titan. I don't know. I'm not going to play it first, but after seeing what they've done with it, I'm a huge fan. I think there are two worthwhile mentions here, and I'm going to say that the honorable mention for Titan is crushing blows in particular. Right, crushing impacts the node gives your hits the ability to be crushing blows, which is a full explanation of what it is on the screen. But the short version of crushing blows is when you're building up the stun on a target, you have a lower threshold you need to hit in order to stun that target. On bosses, that is 80% of the buildup instead of a full 100% of the buildup, where you just cut the rest in. It's like culling strike, right? When you cull an enemy in PoE 1, you do 90% of their health bar and then you remove the last 10%. And the same idea being applied for stun is really fucking cool. I like that a lot. But that's an honorable mention to me, because I think the main thing that I'm interested in from this Ascendency is definitely hulking form. Hulking form's ability to increase effective small passive skills. That is every small passive skill tree on your entire tree. The attribute nodes, the one that gives damage, the ones that give life. That this is very, very strong. Especially we exist. Remember, PoE 2 is a different world than PoE 1, where we don't have notables, right? We only we don't have masteries. We don't have notables. What? we don't have masteries. Which is the one thing that I think would have kept this from being ridiculous in PoE 1, because masteries are so strong and valuable even after their nerfs. But in PoE 2, they didn't show any masteries yet. They might exist, but we didn't see them yet. And if there are no masteries, there are worlds where you could totally justify just not taking a large node, or like a notable, because the small passes are stronger. Combine that with the fact that we know that there are radius jewels in the game besides just unique ones that can be crafted to have other effects on them. And I mean, you see where I'm going with this. This could be some insane late game min-max potential, and I am very much looking forward to seeing that pan out. Alrighty, next up, Warbringer. This one is pretty interesting to me because I think my number one pick from here is different from from your number one pick in a lot of cases, because my number one here is very anti-me. If you know me, if you've been following my channel for a while, especially if you know me as the Sanctum guy, you're going to be very surprised to find that my number one, my very noteworthy thing here is the Turtle Charm section of this Ascendancy tree. The defensive one, that's right. I think most people definitely saw this Ascendancy and saw the Warcry stuff, which, I mean, I'm gonna keep it a buck. That shit is cool. I'm just not a super big fan of that playstyle personally, but I'm glad to see that people are going to try to make it happen in PoE 2. I think the correct answer, the objectively correct answer, is imploding impacts, and the fact that the ability to shred armor below 0 has never existed in PoE ever. And that's worth noting. And I say never ever because even with something like the corrosion effect from Infinite Hunger, he cannot reduce your armor below 0 either. And so the ability to reduce armor below 0 is very, very potent. And I should totally be thinking oh my god, this is gonna be so cool. But I think the ability to invest in block in a way to return it back to a PoE 1 style function where you don't have to raise the shield, as well as the fact that if I remember correctly, somebody correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember them saying that block was going to cap at 100% chance now, as opposed to cap at 75%. And if that was true, I want to know if Turtle Charm, if you are able to cap your block through Turtle Charm, because it sounds a little ridiculous if you can pull that off. I do not know for sure though, so do not take me at face value. This is just something I'm cooking up in my head as a thing that could make Warbringer kind of ridiculous compared to the rest of the field, right? Because it's missing that glancing blows line, where it's missing a little bit of damage coming through the block, if that's true. That's just thoughts, right? Okay. Really strong Ascendancy either way, or at least really cool, right? No idea about the power level of the Ascendancy, but really cool nonetheless. Let's go to Deadeye. This Ascendancy surprised me. If you remember, I feel like nobody was particularly positive on Ascendancy's existence when they showed it in the showcase, because, well, fuck, they just showed us PoE 1 Deadeye, but weaker air quotes. I have a separate thought to talk about that, but that's in a different video. Weaker air quotes. They just showed us nodes that look too familiar to what we already had, and there's things in here that now change my opinion a lot. I need to give a quick shout out to one thing that is in this reveal, and it's not the existence of Tailwind, but rather the buff itself of Tailwind. And it's just because while this is not my main thing that I think is super unique and cool about the Ascendancy, Tailwind seems like it might be an Ascendancy only mechanic, an Ascendancy level mechanic again, as opposed to being put on fucking boots. And so as a result, it is worth noting how much stronger Tailwind looks like it will be in PoE 1, PoE 2, as Tailwind is now its movement speed, skill speed, and increased evasion rating, and it's a lot of it. Stacks up to 10 times, which means you'll get 10% MS, 30% skill speed, 150% ink evasion rating, alongside if you take Windward, which I currently am of the opinion that if you take Gathering Winds, you must take Windward as well, will also give you 30% DR. That is really strong. Do not sleep on the sheer amount of evasion that is. That's the thing that I've been the most fixated on since seeing this. That amount of evasion is a lot. And I think it's really cool. Now, as far as the thing that's actually called my attention here, unfortunately, it's not called shots, even though that's also a unique effect that we don't have anywhere else. It is Thrilling Chase. Just because this type of effect is a scalar, right? That is a unique vector of character power. I'm a big fan of unique vectors of character power, ones that have not existed before. And knowing that skills that consume charges can do pretty cool things. You know, my targeted skill for this leak for the start of early access is Flicker Strike, which is a power charge consuming skill. If you were a fan of like skills that could be using like the Barrage buff skill or Rain of Arrows, Avidity could be awesome. And who knows what other skill gems are going to show, or we're going to have in early access that do this. What other skill gems are going to be added after early access that work with this, as well as, or not after early access, but like during early access that other classes come out, as well as what unique items will interact with it and whatnot. This is a really cool effect that I'm really just hoping blossoms into something insane, right? That's why I say like it's my focal point here compared to the other nodes that existed in Deadeye. Now let's talk about Pathfinder. Pathfinder. Unfortunately, this Ascendancy does not interest me as much as you would think. I will give out the two things that I think are worth noting here. In terms of the uniqueness of this Ascendancy, one, it is just an Ascendancy that you have skill points, which I think is really interesting. I don't know if it's particularly strong. It doesn't even feel like it's particularly on theme with the Ascendancy. It's just there, and it kind of sort of makes sense, but like, you know what I mean? But the bigger thing, the much bigger thing is obviously overwhelming toxicity. It is definitely just a unique scaling line that is within this Ascendancy, doubling your number of poisons you can inflict, but making them last less duration. It's still a lot of damage. It feels kind of boring to say that, but I'm not too enthralled by Enduring Elixirs. The concoction stuff, it's hard for me to have an opinion on with no numbers for the skills. I'm glad to see that there's more concoctions, but I'm gonna have to hold my opinion on the concoctions until we can actually play with them. It's hard to give an opinion here because nothing here like gives me something to be super duper excited about. There's no 4-pointer for concoctions to do something insane with them. The only real damage scaling thing in here is the existence of the poison side. That the life flask stuff is, I mean, it's cool, but I didn't like it too much in PoE 1. I'm not going to be the biggest fan of it in PoE 2. And it's hard to give a value of any sort to the speed stuff because, well, I don't know, right? That's the thing that I feel like is only going to be valuable to you if you've like played the game, right? And I haven't played yet, so I can't really describe how strong that's going to be. We'll see though. Next up, Blood Mage. This Ascendancy's theming is fucking cool. The nodes are lame as shit for the most part, but I do have a notable mention that I feel like I have to call it out. Blood Barbs. Everything else in here is really cool and definitely deserves some like attention of its own in terms of like the raw power level that it seems to read. This is the Ascendancy that read to me as the most raw power level. It just read as a lot of those that are really strong, but in terms of things that are actually cool and unique, because that's what I'm more focused on, because you know, at the end of the day, balance comes and goes, but design and ideally stays forever. Blood Barbs is the focal point of the design for me in this Ascendancy, as it is an effect that we have never had in PoE, period. Elemental damage contributing to bleeding magnitude is a thing that I've actually fantasized about having in PoE 1 for quite a while, as a way to help bring bleed back to the spotlight, the same way that Ignite got brought back through Shaper of Flames, the way that Poison builds find their way to have all damage get poison all the time. It always bothered me that bleed never got anything of this type, even though it's just because bleed was so well scaled, even without these lines, that it would have been a problem if it existed in PoE 1. And so here we are with the ability to have it exist in PoE 2. And I think that's really cool. It's also really interesting just noting that, like, you know, I knew this could happen, but it was really funny seeing it. Gain percent of damage as extra physical damage. If you're a PoE 1 player, you understand that like that was never historically possible, and so it's just really funny to see this happen. There are other things that I guess are worth noting in here. An honorable mention is definitely the like the I'm actually going to say Grasping Wounds is my honorable mention. I think Sunder the Flesh is most people's honorable mention, or even like primary focus here. But the only reason I'm giving Grasping Wounds it is because of how unique the effect is in terms of defensively. I know we've had Progenesis and Pet Blood at PoE 1 forever, but I haven't seen where that effect would come from in PoE 2 quite yet, and so I just want to put that out there as like a very interesting defensive player that I'm a huge fan of, right? Either way, Blood Mage has a lot of cool stuff going on. This Ascendancy looks, again, like I said earlier, it looks a little overloaded, but that just is, you know, initial perspective, right? Infernalist, lot of stuff going on in this Ascendancy. It's really hard to pick a one thing to fixate on from this Ascendancy, so I'm going to give you two. And it is, one of them is going to be really normal, and one of them is going to be something that I don't know if it really makes a lot of sense initially, but it's the thing that I'm the most interested in seeing the progression of. So I'll give you the normal one first. Obviously, it is nodes 5 and 6, Divine of Possession and Master Darkness. As Demon Form was definitely the thing that I thought was the coolest when they showed this off in the showcase. Just the idea, they explained the theory about the idea behind, you know, casting faster and like having this ramping up damage over time you take, and then just getting stronger and stronger over the course of time. I think that node is really cool. I will not talk about the detail of what was leaked for the gem that it provides, or the skill that it provides in full. Just know that it is really strong. Like, they are not kidding when they say that you shapeshifting into a demon vastly boosts the powers of your spells, right? You'll get to see what that is in game. I'm not going to be sharing the leak here, but know that it is really, really strong, right? And then, you know, Master Darkness is what I assume Demon Flame to be is a resource for, you know, how, like, it's a stacking resource for how strong both the degen and the damage buff will be. I think that's going to be very valuable as well. A very strong Ascendancy node, very large fan of it. But the actual thing that I'm most interested in is the altered flesh into the 3 badass nodes, which, by the way, my fellow Saint enjoys. You cannot escape badass gaze. You cannot. Even now, you cannot escape badass gaze, and it's definitely because that node just looks a little ridiculous to me. All 3 of them look very strong to me in different ways, and I obviously you don't spend your entire Ascendancy just taking badass nodes, but the strength of them is very appealing to me in all 3 categories. And I think it's really cool to like keep an eye on like what people might pull off because of these nodes. Also, altered flesh is just, I mean, I like damage shift. Fizz 20% fizz shift is really nice, just generically defensively, but I'm more interested in why you would want to shift specifically towards fire, because I feel like it's meant to overlap with another mechanic, or just, you know, stacking max res. Who knows, right? That's what I got my eye on there. The rest of the Ascendancy is worth noting. It is really cool still. Like, this is a really cool Ascendancy, top to bottom, very cool design. I just told you I was only going to fix it on a couple of things to save ourselves a lot of the time of me like rambling on forever about how cool this fucking Ascendancy is, right? 4 more Ascendancies to go. Let's talk about Witch Hunter next. This Ascendancy is probably my favorite Ascendancy in terms of the literal like combat design based off of what I can read, right? No idea what it's going to play like yet, but what I can read has me super appealed to. And so I am going to call like my honorable mention very obviously as the Explode node. Second honorable mention goes to the weapon set skill points, and that is just because I think it's a little ridiculous to have additional solvable skill points. It's worth noting that that is not plus 20 skill points. That is 20 of your skill points swap into weapon set skill points, which gives you more of that weapon set flexibility. I believe that bumps you up to over 40 skill points that are in this bracket, which is really, really strong for the weapon swap playstyle. Now, the main focal point for me in this Ascendancy, Witchbane. Witchbane in the No Mercy, talking about concentration as a mechanic. The effect of concentration is as follows. Enemies have a less cooldown recovery rate the lower their concentration, scaling down to 50% less cooldown recovery rate when their concentration is 0. 50% less CDR. To like put that in perspective, by the way, assuming the target has no CDR whatsoever, that is doubling the cooldown of their skills. It is one of the most interesting defensive layers I've ever seen, because it definitely means that you could throw off a boss's entire rhythm due to bosses having cooldowns on their skills, right? I think that's going to be really awesome to see. It might mess you up a little bit mentally, but I think it's really awesome to see. And it seems pretty easy to maintain. Like once you do the top 40% of their, what do you call it? The top 40% of their life pool, you just keep them down on concentration. It is going to be interesting to see how this plays out on like a boss with phases though. That's my one concern. And then related to that, of course, is no mercy, like the damage buff, because as long as you can keep doing damage to them, they will always have no concentration and therefore take 30% more damage, have the 50% less CDR. But you know, enemy has phases that could like really mess this up. There's something to keep an eye on, but I still think it's really cool, and it's just so unique that my eyes have been drawn to it every time I've seen Witch Hunter since. Next up, Gemling Legionnaire. This Ascendancy as a whole is unique as hell, right? I said this in my last video talking about the Ascendancies and how this Ascendancy is just so different from everything we've had in the game so far. And I mean, the theme is true here. If I had to call my attention to one thing, it's actually going to be enhanced effectiveness. Inherent benefits from intelligence, strength, and dex are doubled. I think it's really, really insane to think about for whatever, you know, stat stacker we get into, right? Like this makes the existence of strong stat stackers an inevitability, not a possibility, right? It's not going to be a matter of if they exist. It's a matter of how strong they're going to be. And that's really cool. It is that strong. I'm not a big fan of stat stackers personally, but you know, I won't complain about another archetype getting another really strong form of support for itself. Honorable mention goes to Gem Studded for literally being a rule breaking support, right? Like it literally just says you could use 2 copies of the same support gem in different skills, which could be really cool, practically speaking. Don't be surprised if you see all sorts of weird and strange Gemling Legionnaires that do all sorts of weird and strange shit to skill damage, right? Don't be surprised. Really cool Ascendancy overall. And last two, the Monk, my favorite class. Let's start with the Invoker of the Elements, which I'm gonna keep it a buck. I'm still not playing this, even though the nodes look so much cooler now that I've seen them all in full. I have two things to mention here. We'll go with honorable mention first. Is the Soul Springs Eternal, because I think if you're a fan of trigger builds in PoE 1, you're gonna almost certainly be locked into playing Invoker to emulate that type of style in PoE 2 through the Soul Springs Eternal, giving meta skills 35% more energy. That is really, really, really strong. At least my understanding is just it literally makes them trigger more often. So don't be surprised if you feel the need to play that way in order to use those skills. Very cool. Now, the thing that is definitely the standout to me is protect me from harm. Not because it's like super unique or anything and very like wild and out there. It's just strong, very centralizing, and a little concerningly strong actually. Evasion rating also grants physical damage reduction. Is a ridiculous stat to think about, just because that's always been the gap in evasion rating, right? Like if you think about our opinion of evasion, pretty much in every game, right? Dodge taking is cool and all until you get hit. This is the problem with Brewmasters and WoW. This is the problem with evasion characters in PoE 1. It's going to be the same thing that we have here in PoE 2. Dodging is cool and all until, you know, wham! Hit upside the head, you take a fuckload of damage and you die. So having a source of PDR through your evasion is incredible. And definitely worth observing and keeping an eye on going forward. I'm also going to take this time to highlight my disappointment in Meditate, just because I don't like that it can't be used when you take damage. I was kind of hoping that it was going to have some sort of really cool like active defensive usage, and it just doesn't. So lame. Next up and last on the list is Acolyte of Shayula, my baby. This gives me a perfect opportunity to talk about a little bit of what I'm going to plan to do with this Ascendancy, because I will be starting this, if you were curious. In case it wasn't super clear, I will be starting an Acolyte of Shayula. I'm just setting it and making it happen. And the honorable mention here is that I mean, they have the darkness stuff in here, and even if I don't, like, if you were on my stream last night, I don't think this is a particularly strong ascendancy. I don't, or at least like the darkness part, right? I don't think the darkness of this ascendancy is particularly strong. I think it reeks of something that was really broken in testing, and they just neutered the hell out of it, and as a result, it looks really weak to me here. I am just going to be interested in seeing how it looks after some changes, but the theory behind it is really cool. The idea of having that additional resource, like that additional life bar that kind of comes back, it's kind of like elemental ages, for example, but the idea of it costing all of my spirit and then it only really being 600 at level 100, it just, I don't know. Then like Grasp of the Void trying to give me damage that scales off of things that can be taken from me and not even giving me that much damage relative to like just taking reality rending. An Inner Silence being almost necessary to even make Embrace the Darkness feel like I have decent. It's not good enough to me. And so my actual thing that I'm more fixated on, and I was hoping it was going to be good because it looks super cool, is Into the Breach, baby. That skill is fucking awesome. It was the thing that definitely appealed to me the most. It was the idea of not only are you studying under the Dreamer, but you are now going to be following the Dreamer into the Breach and looking for these Flames of Triula, which they gave us the list of the buffs here, which it's very worth noting that the purple flames give you 7% damage as chaos for 5 seconds, so 10 seconds with lucid dreaming, and 14% damage, so 7% damage, so it's 14% damage for 10 seconds, and it can stack up to 10 times. That is a hilarious world where you're just walking around with 10 purple flames of Triula and absolutely nuking things. I think it's hilarious, but I just like the theming, and I'm glad that the damage of it, wow, that was hard to get out. The damage of it came around, right? Also, I guess I should give a shout out to the mana stuff. Like the mana stuff does seem pretty strong. It just, not my first inclination, right? Overall, though, Ascendency is really cool. Very much looking forward to playing with it. I will be playing with Dream stuff, and then we're gonna do some testing with other nodes to see what combination of things actually feel good offensively and defensively, all that good stuff. All right, so that's everything regarding the stuff that was shown in the Ascendencies. I want to make a quick footnote here, and it's just because, like I said earlier, this is mostly about the things that I think are cool, not necessarily the things that are super strong. And it's just because power level is something that we don't know yet. I consider myself to be a pretty well-learned player of PoE 1, and I consider the opinions of a lot of the creators that are talking about PoE 2, like theory crafting right now, very highly, very, very highly even. But I would be remiss to ignore the fact that this is all theory craft at the moment, right? None of us have really played, like, even the people who have played PoE 2, from my knowledge, we're not given any version of the game that went beyond Act 3. And thus, they haven't actually experienced the game in full. And thus, we're all just kind of spitballing based on our understanding of the game so far, which is still kind of in bits and pieces, right? And we're still adapting to the amount of information that is coming out on a daily basis, as we, scrounge together everything that we can learn on our way into the early access through interviews, right? So don't make your decision on Ascendancy based on the supposed power level of the Ascendancy. Make it based on the thing that actually seems really cool and effective to you. And I do say effective, right? Because, it's hard to discard power level as a part of your thought process, but be more inclined to look at the thing that is cool, right? Look at the thing that actually really sparks your interest in terms of something that could definitely work and it could enable a really funny ass idea, right? Anywhoosies, that's it for me. I have one more video for you guys for PoE 2's early access releases tomorrow, just as a cool little thing, something different. And then we go into PoE 2's early access on Friday, that will be streamed live over on Twitch. That's in the description. I believe I'll also be dual streaming it again, unless something goes horrifically wrong. Fingers crossed it doesn't. It'll be streamed here and on Twitch. And then also, if you want to, hang out with people in the Discord, that link is in the description as well. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the Ascendencies. Sorry for the long ass video, but there's a lot to talk about with 12 Ascendencies, and we just had an info dump come out through it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.